What happens when you finally build the shiny metal model you bought over a decade ago and have been avoiding ever since? Let's find out. Hey, I'm Amanda, and this is Acutely Amanda, where we alternate between fiction and fiber arts. Love crafting? Love fantasy worlds? Then you're in the right place. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. So let's dive in. Model building might not come with yarn or fabric, but it's still a kind of making. Shaping, problem solving, and working with your hands. And that's what draws me to any craft, really. I'm sure many of you have seen the metal earth models in stores and online. In the US, they seem to be in almost every single gift shop. They're little flat packs of pieces, usually quite affordable, and they entice you with visions of something you built yourself as a souvenir. They look easier than traditional models. Maybe it's the lack of needing to paint or glue. I made a model airplane once when I was around 11 or 12. I remember how difficult it was to hold small pieces together while the glue dried and to apply the stickers accurately. It isn't something I remember myself as being good at. But these shiny flat-packed metal pieces in gift shops near t-shirts and mugs, they whisper, "This is achievable." I finally gave in to the whisperings way back in 2013 or 2014. My now husband and I went on one of our early weekends away together to Portland, Maine. One of these was in a gift shop. It was a P-51 Mustang. Now I know, a metal model of a fighter plane might not be the first thing you expect on a cozy crafting channel, but this one had a hold on me. I'm a bit of a World War II nerd. Yes, I have the t-shirt to prove it. And this exact plane was the first model I ever made back in middle school. Back then I felt such frustration about some glue spilling over the cockpit and ruining the ability to see into it that I'd gotten rid of it, which I later regretted. Here's a piece of advice. Don't get rid of something in the heat of the moment that you crafted just because it feels imperfect. The imperfections are part of what makes handmade special. So this was a redemption piece. Then I didn't do it for more than a decade. Anxiety about doing it wrong? Probably. My procrastination largely comes from perfectionism, a tendency I'm battling here with all of you on this channel. One of the reasons I started this was as part of a journey to do my projects I've had lying around. I procrastinate on different projects for different reasons. This one was a mental hang-up about perfectionism. So while every season I'm sometimes making something brand new I just picked up or came up with the idea for, I'm also making sure I'm completing the things that have been waiting. Sometimes for years. More than a decade is a long time. It was time to sit down and make this model. One evening, I was stuck home with a migraine bad enough I also couldn't look at screens. But I was bored. I figured this can't take more than an evening, so I pulled it out and got to work. As you can see, it really does come in simple sheets of metal. What I didn't expect, though, was how difficult it would be to get the pieces out of those sheets. I remembered snapping pieces out of my previous model. These don't work that way. I was pretty worried I would ruin the pieces just getting them out of the sheets. They were also sharper than anticipated. While I didn't cut my fingers, the pieces were pokey, and I was pretty worried I was going to. The way the kit works, once you get the pieces out, is there are tabs and slots to slide them into. Then you either fold the tab over or twist them 90 degrees. Which one you do is indicated in the instructions. I found it much easier to do the bending using pliers for my jewelry making kit. It does say in the instructions that needle-nose pliers are helpful, but it doesn't say that on the back of the kit itself. That always frustrates me when a kit doesn't reveal that certain things will be helpful before you open it. I also found for rolling up the wheels that it helped to roll around a pencil to get the perfect circular shape. Not something the instructions noted. Something I didn't do but discovered later when researching the kits and company is that most model maker enthusiasts recommend using metal shears to get the pieces out. That would have been helpful for sure. Some of the pieces were easy enough to put together, but pieces with more tabs were harder to get just so to slide together. You also have to be careful not to bend the tabs back and forth too much, or they might break. I had the misfortune of one of mine breaking. I fixed it with a piece of Scotch tape. It wouldn't win any model building contests, but you can't tell on my bookshelf, and it's keeping together okay. The irony that my second P-51 Mustang is also imperfect is not lost on me. But I won't let the imperfection spoil the enjoyment. I made it, with my own two hands and a little bit of tape. All in all, this took me just about an hour to complete. The shiny metal does look cool. Metal Earth ranks it as an easy model. It was speedier than traditional plastic model, but I'm not sure I'd say it's easier even so. I felt less on edge making my first model than this one. I also can't skip pointing out that the P-51 Mustang's wings are backwards in the model. They should be flipped over. Kind of an inexcusable mistake for a historic model. I didn't notice it when I bought it because I was mostly looking at the historic photo on the back. Who provides a photo side by side with the model and doesn't notice a mistake like that? One thing I got curious about while working on this was whether metal models are more eco-friendly than plastic ones. You might think they are, and some people definitely do think that, but it turns out the truth is a bit more complicated. Metal can be endlessly recycled, but its production is energy intensive. Plastic is easier to make, but harder to deal with later. I'll link a good article in the description if you want to nerd out on that with me. Since this is a crafting season, the history I'll be digging into isn't about the engineering behind the P-51 Mustang or its role in winning the war, but rather about model making. Why do we make models? When did we start? When did model making as we know it become a thing? The history of model making sort of depends on what you mean when you say model. If you mean miniature modes of transportation like boats, then humanity has been making those for basically as far back as we know. Miniature boats are in ancient Egyptian tombs. If you mean architectural models, well, those are as far back as humans were designing buildings, with some of the earliest models coming from archaeological sites in the Ukraine and dating back 3000 to 6000 BC. But if what you mean is model making as a hobby, as a DIY and a craft, then that's a little bit different. Model kits like this one and the plastic one I made back in middle school were first produced in the mid-1930s when a company named Frog, not kidding, made a 1/72nd model kit for an airplane they named Penguin. There's just something about airplanes, isn't there? These models were usually made of plastic and resin. In the early 1950s, model kits became mass manufactured using injection molding, but it wasn't until the 1960s that the hobby became really popular. Automobiles got added into the mix too. The 1980s to 2000 are considered the model making golden era. Aha! That's when I made my middle school model. Who knew I was on trend then? From the 2000s on, techniques have evolved to include such elements as 3D printed pieces. Some modelers can even design and 3D print their own pieces to then turn around and assemble. But I've mostly been talking about plastic, and Metal Earth is, well, metal. Where does it fit into all of this? I tried to find the history of the company, but the only source I could find was a post on a Reddit thread. It says that metal models were invented in China in 2006 by Yi Zufeng. There's some skepticism in the thread about the veracity of this claim, but I can't find any information to the contrary. I even contacted Metal Earth and asked them, but as of the time of recording this, I haven't heard back. Then I went back to digging and found a website who was attempting the same deep dive as me. They said that Peace Cool is Metal Earth for China, whose originator is Tenyo, a Japanese brand. From what I can tell, these three sister brands are considered the best brands of metal modeling with the best quality. My research indicates that metal models are solidly in the modern 2000s and up era of modeling. So, would I recommend this kit? Making an easy ranked metal model was definitely faster than the plastic model I made as a kid. For that reason, I'd recommend trying it before a plastic model, as the time and money investments are both less. But you do need to actually like the look of the shiny metal at the end. If that doesn't appeal to you, then I'd advise finding an easy ranked plastic model and going from there. I also must say the historian in me would advise you to pick a model that has better historical accuracy than mine. Side eye intended. But I don't regret my model. It reminds me that I shouldn't be so tough on myself with my DIY and crafting. Most of the time, the mistakes that glare out at me when I first finish are something no one else notices, and they're all part of the handcrafting experience. That's it for this episode of Acutely Amanda. Have you ever made a model kit or wanted to but felt intimidated? Tell me in the comments, and if you like this exploration of model making, hit thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe. Next week we're back to sewing as I make a pillow out of a vintage pattern I found in an independent fabric store. For more behind the scenes content and all my creative work, visit opinionsofaWolf.com. See you next time. Bye!